streaming. Okay. And good morning from Philadelphia.
And James coming in from Westchester, New York.
This is UFO News Network Sunday. We've got with us today Chris Wolford joining us after our little 2-week vacation. And Chris, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. How are you, gentlemen?
I'm doing fine, ready to go. I enjoyed my vacation, but I'm glad to be getting back into this. Chris is a UFO researcher, a contactee himself. Had some contact with the Nolan-Green study as a prospective subject with that particular study. And we were talking before we even got rolling. We were talking a little bit about everything, which is was probably good enough to put on the air, but we got into it a little soon. We were talking about the Atacama mummy and the controversy surrounding that. With Stephen Greer making all sorts of claims, negative claims about Stanford University and Gary Nolan. And Chris, you know Gary Nolan a little bit. I've dealt with him a little bit too. James, you've dealt with him a little bit too. We think he's an okay guy, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, and of the To the Stars Academy group, I think he's, at least on the grassroots as far as dealing with researchers, he's been the most open and receptive to offering, his version of it and what, alluding to what the direction may be in certain topics.
Yeah, he's helped me a lot. Yep, he's helped me a lot.
Yeah, and I was going to say a lot of the other TTSA guys are just completely silent on that.
I would agree, or they delete their Facebooks, or you can't add them. You have to message them, and that's become very, very hard. No, Nolan has been wonderful. I mean, the first interaction I ever had with him, he came to my aid when I was being attacked for sharing my experience when I had my first experience with whatever this phenomenon is at 4 years old. And he said to the people, listen, Chris, if he's experienced it, then he knows. There's no question in his mind. Now, other people, they can have questions. That's fine. But in his mind, it really did happen. So you have to at least listen to him and take his word on it versus just wanting to debunk me and or throw rocks at my, what I've said. So he's been nothing but very nice and cordial, even when I had to deal with a situation that was not my own, with him kind of loosely with another UFO researcher, which we will get into later on.
Okay. So basically, that contact with Dr. Nolan that predates your possibly getting involved with the study that he's working on with that Green.
Yeah, it was well before that. What happened with me, I found out because of two things. One was Grant Cameron had picked up on that he was part of this experiencer study at not so much at Stanford, but on his own, and working with Kit Green, maybe at Stanford. I don't know. I don't really honestly know how much they do really look at that stuff there. I don't know. I wasn't told. But so I became aware through Grant Cameron in the book Phenomenon from Andy Jacobson. And then I realized early on that John Burroughs was also one of the first people that they had worked with. So I kind of knew that if I was ever going to get as close as I could to what I dealt with, he'd be probably a good guy to interact with. And I wouldn't bug him. That's the thing. Like, I don't want to come off as like, I didn't want to bug him. So I would message him here and there and we'd talk. And finally, I would say early January, right after Christmas, this past January, we really began on Facebook Messenger to go back and forth. I shared my experience. He said that he didn't get to read it initially because he was so busy. And I sent to him another link that was on Facebook that was a written testimony that he could easily digest and understand. And he got back to me like a month later, not until February. And I basically said, listen, I would love to be a part of this study if if you're willing to even entertain that idea. And he said, yeah, let me look at your experience again. Let me get back to you. And basically how it went down is he never really committed to me a yes or no. He just strung me, I shouldn't say strung me along, but alluded to the fact that yes, you would be a good consideration with what you've had happen and your background with you having open heart surgery. It's very intriguing. Not that that was the case of like my open heart surgery wasn't the cause of what I experienced, but it was interesting of note that because I've had these other surgeries or other medical issues, they thought that was very interesting, and that was a very good way to kind of approach my experiences through that. So basically, two things happened: the MJ Benias debacle with him, and then the John Burroughs on my own, kind of bugging John Burroughs a little bit here and there, asking him, what do I expect? What is the protocol? And basically, John Burroughs, who is a nice guy,
yes, he is. Absolutely, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, we have to remember he is a nice guy. He went through a very traumatic event. I may not agree with everything he says, but with that being said, he still was part of this Nolan Kit Green study, and I wanted to desperately to find out what it was like. And that's when Dr. Gary Nolan got back in touch with me and said, Chris, sadly, you're no longer being considered as a candidate for this study because you weren't in the military.
Okay.
And I kind of knew that was going to be the case because everything I had read and been told, it was former military people. There were a few civilians, but I don't know who
Bledsoe,
they are.
Bledsoe, I would believe.
Yeah, Chris Bledsoe being the only one that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And Whitley Strieber.
Whitley Strieber. Oh, all right. So, well, maybe I'm not popular enough yet, but and I'm not like
you got to write a book,
Strieber.
Chris. You got to get a couple books out there.
Well,
start your own
honestly,
podcast.
I would think that nobody said anything, but I think a prime candidate that they would have looked at as far as non-military would be Travis Walton. Just because of how, and honestly, I would not be surprised if that he is a candidate and nobody's kind of opened the lid on that. But who knows? Who knows? That's just my own speculation.
Yeah, and then I tried to, because I kind of took that news kind of hard. Then I was exploring the option of tracking down Kit Green, because I don't think people realize he lives here in Michigan, where I live currently, and he doesn't live that far away from me. And I know where the hospital he works at. And I didn't want to get like stalkerish. I didn't want to go and just bombard him one day at work and be like, hey, I would like to do that, because I've heard through the grapevine that he just shuts people down big time. He won't even talk about anything to just some Joe Bull off the street. So I didn't think that was the best approach. So I kind of let Gary Nolan be. And then he always would be nice to me, and I would ask him questions about To the Stars, and he'd share some things. And I've always thought he was an up and up guy. There's nothing shady about him. The only thing that I did not like, and it kind of resolved itself a little bit now that he's on Twitter and he's talking a little bit, is he deleted his Facebook account because supposedly the whole Cambridge Analytica thing, which it's hilarious to me, but whatever. I mean, if he wanted his privacy, he wanted his privacy. I get it. But I just don't buy that was the sole reason why he wanted to delete his Facebook. I believe that he was at one point, and you guys could attest to this. He was talking to a lot of people on Facebook.
Sure he was.
And
sure he was. He was talking to me even.
Exactly.
Of all people.
Well, I'm just saying, like, he was saying a lot of things that I don't think To the Stars was necessarily happy to have to control him. So they basically, and I don't know this, but it would make sense to me, my own opinion, to basically tell him, hey, you need to cool it. Either delete your Facebook or don't go on there. And he obviously, if he still has a Facebook, people are going to bug him and he's going to want to respond eventually. So he just deleted it. And he gave a week's notice, but I just found that very interesting. And then also, I will say also there's some other interesting people, I would say, in the Invisible College world that were connected to Gary Nolan loosely.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure of that.
Diane Plazolka being number one, and she deleted her Facebook too because she said that she deleted it because it was a conflict of interest with the school, which, again, I don't buy whatsoever. But that's that, whatever. But I just find that very interesting that all these people that are close to whatever the supposed truth is, they go dark. And it's kind of disheartening a little bit. You kind of have to follow them and be stalkerish because you really have no choice. I mean, To the Stars has done, I thought, a fantastic job of relating these events and getting them out. And Tom DeLonge, love him or hate him, he's been as good as he could be getting this stuff out on social media. Now, that doesn't come into the whole Joe Rogan podcast debacle. I'm not even going to get into it. But I think that he's done a very good job, at least on social media, giving us what we need and other elements too, to kind of piece this together and realize that this is not something, A, that we've seen before, and B, this is totally something new, and C, we really need to pay attention to it because it's literally changing by the day.
Yeah, in the Washington Post, they just did another article the other day, saying, this is, you can thank that guy from Blink-182 for the media taking UFO seriously.
I counted 10 articles. Now, some of them were the original Washington Post article, but some of them are new articles. Newsweek wrote on it. SOFREP wrote on it, which is a military trade publication. There was a science. Now, I know this isn't like a legitimate science website in the sense of like it's like accredited or anything, but the fact that they picked up on the story is huge in my opinion.
Yeah, Scientific American wrote an article. They talked to Justice from To the Stars.
Really? I did not know
this
that.
was back. This was back either late December or early January, but they did. Some science sites are picking up on it a little bit here and there. Not. I mean, most of them, I think, have at least touched on it at least a little bit. They've written a story here, a story there. But Billy Cox is back in the game. This is Billy Cox back in the game. I kind of knew that was going to happen. Something was going to bring him back in, and this did it. So he's back in the game. Always bringing his curmudgeonly attitude to every situation. But he's great. He's one of the guys who's great. Knapp is on it. It is picking up. But not a whole lot of new information. And one thing that's not coming out at all from the To the Stars Academy is the contactee angle. They're not touching that with the 10-foot pole openly, even though we know behind the scenes they're doing it. And I think that's kind of interesting. What are your thoughts on all that, Chris?
I honestly agree with Grant Cameron. You have to lead and walk the public to this phenomenon is real. That's the first step, and they're doing that perfectly. Step number 2 would be to release some more footage, maybe some more papers, and get them to the Washington Post, New York Times, stuff like that, and let it be in the zeitgeist of America for a while, or even the whole world for a little bit, so it can ferment. And then you go of the angle of, well, all right, so this phenomenon's real. What is this phenomenon and who is behind this phenomenon? And I think if you were just to say simply that they're aliens, you would be doing a giant disservice to your own program, your own agenda, and quite honestly, you would get the ridicule factor right back going 100%. What again, within at least America, and Americans would not take it seriously. But if you slowly walk them to this phenomenon is real, and the government, the U.S. government, has been studying it for quite a long time, then I think you're going to get somewhere. But if you just come out and say, yeah, they're aliens, and you proclamate that, yes, we have not been alone for the last whatever millions or hundreds of thousands of years, you're going to look kind of silly, in my opinion. And I honestly think that's why they have not chose to go with that. The others, they're not talking about the others. They're only talking about it was a Tic Tac. We have the Go Fast video. We had the Nimitz event with it being underwater, and you have stuff above the water in the sky. So I don't think right now we're to the point where we're going to want to talk about the possible perspective of the extraterrestrial hypothesis just yet. So.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, the other
Yeah,
thing that they're talking about a little bit is the materials. And that's some pretty interesting stuff. And that goes back quite a ways. I mean, that actually goes back decades. Various possibly ET fragments, pieces of metal, alloys have been turned up. They have been studied. And Professor Peter Sturrock from Stanford wrote a paper just at the tail end of the last century, late 1990s, I believe. There's no specific date on it, but based on the citations he includes, I would have to say it was written in the late 90s. He couldn't figure out where this piece that these pieces he came across from the Ubatuba incident in Brazil, which goes back. Apparently, the incident itself happened in the 1930s, and the material started getting studied in the 1950s. He couldn't figure out where the stuff was manufactured, which is kind of important. It's important. That's he dug pretty deep. He went through in this paper how much digging he did, and still couldn't figure out who made this stuff.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think that we'll ever truly understand the metal material, the metamaterials 100%. I think we're gonna just understand them enough that they're not from here. But that doesn't mean that they're, i.e., extraterrestrial. Where are they coming from? And they can't be manufactured by processes that we have currently on Earth, or machines, or technology here on Earth, which is very interesting. I know Jeremy Corbell in Patient 17 with Nanoman, he talks about that at length, that this stuff is not found here on Earth, and it cannot be machined here on Earth. So where's this stuff from? I mean, you are left with a few answers, and again, that would then point back again to the extraterrestrial, but I would argue, let's not go that route just yet. Let's kind of look at this phenomenon as a whole and how it interacts with people and how it affects people and how it has a tricksterish nature to itself.
Oh, that's for sure.
When you really look in this topic deeply, it looks back at you. And I'm not the only one saying this. I've talked to quite a few researchers, quite a few experiencers. They all say the same thing. When you truly get to the one-on-one stuff and you start to look and dig down, the phenomenon actually looks back at you. And no, I'm not going to say like a great alien appears in your house or anything, or you have a ship that's hovering above your house. But you start to pick up on little weird things that happen to you in your life that cannot be explained. I could share those experiences that I've had in my life.
Yeah, we want to get to that. We do.
All right.
Actually, doubling back before we get to that, though. Let's. What were you able to pick up about what the the Green Nolan study was going to do as far as bringing in contactees and studying them. We talked a little bit about this before. There was going to be a control group. Grant has talked about an experiment where they would have a contactee at location A being in an MRI machine, and then another one also in an MRI at point B. And apparently, what they were going to do is try to send psychic messages back and forth and literally measure the speed. How is literally thought faster than light, that type of thing. I don't know if you heard anything about that. Or
I did not hear. I did hear about the MRI because obviously that's what Dr. Kit Green works with is MRI machines. You know, he's a neuroscientist. I forget the exact expertise he's in, but from what I was told is, first of all, you need to sign an NDA for at least 15 years. You don't get to talk about what they do whatsoever. Number two is they do take a vial of your blood because they're going to go test that both at Stanford and here at the DMC in Michigan, where Kit Green is located at. And again, the prospect, honestly, when I brought this up to my wife, I kind of hid it from her for a couple of months. And she was like, did you really want to be a guinea pig? And I kind of agreed with her. I'm like, once you go down that rabbit hole and you do that, I don't know that you could ever go back. Not that like anything nefarious would happen. And I'm very curious as to see what they would come up with. But I just don't know that I would want to do that. You know, I don't know. It's just me.
Well, you've got to sign an NDA. I mean, that's one thing. You get involved in all this stuff. You find things out, and you want to share it, but you've signed this non-disclosure agreement.
Exactly. So that kind of just turned me off, and I was actually glad in the end that I was not a candidate in their mind. I still would like to pursue eventually to go and try to find Dr. Kit Green and kind of like possibly talk to him. But again, from what I've been told, he's very apprehensive to talking to people. And I don't want to just bug a random stranger. I know that I wouldn't like that. So I've got to kind of pick and choose whether I really want to do that or not. It's very tempting because, again, he lives not that far away from me. I know exactly what hospital he works at. I know exactly what department he works at. So it's kind of hard for me to do, not to do that. But we'll see. Maybe eventually, if I work up gumption, maybe I'll do that. I don't know. But as far as the actual study, they were very tight-lipped. Other than, yes, I have to sign an NDA, and you will have to give blood. And you would have to, basically, I would have, since I'm not in California, I would have to obviously be tested here in Michigan, and then they'd probably send those samples to Gary Nolan in California. So, I don't know more than that. They don't tell you a whole lot. And, you guys dealt with Gary Nolan. He kind of, he'll let you in on some things, but he also holds his cards tight to his chest. He doesn't tell you everything, and, So.
There was also a lot of, you'd ask him a question. He'd say, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. I got to find out. And then you would never get the answer. I have no doubt that he asked, but it's like he probably didn't get the answer either,
Well, yeah, and then I don't honestly know how much they're actually including him in on, because he's technically just the scientific advisor to the stars, and his study that he's doing with Kit Green is actually separate from To the Stars. So, and they kind of lean on it, but they kind of don't. So right. I don't know how much of a crossover there is. I don't know. It is interesting that he is talking again at least on Twitter, but he's again, he's like the Riddler. He'll answer you, but he'll answer you in a riddle. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's double back to the experiences that you had yourself that put you in a position to at least be talking to these guys a little bit. You said you had one at beginning at 4. That's pretty young.
Yeah, I was at my grandmother's house here in the thumb of Michigan in a small town called Sebring. I would spend routinely like part of my summer there, and this took place in the summertime in 1984. And I will say this: I don't know what I interacted with. Just the before I get into this story, I don't know what I interacted with, but I will say that it did take place. And the reason why I know that is because of my sense of smell. You can't smell in your dreams. Now, I say that by there's a researcher that everybody should be reading his books. He's a good friend of mine, Joshua Cutchin. The Brimstone Deceit book is fantastic because it shows without a shadow of a doubt that your sense of smell with paranormal events or even UFO events is very much a part of the event. It's almost more so than anything else that's taking place. You would think that's not the case, but when you read his book, you kind of see that the sense of smell is a very unique sense in that it actually records it on your brain, where if you remember something, you kind of forget it. But if it's something significant and you can remember that smell, you almost like go back to what happened to you. So, it was summertime. I don't know exactly what month in the summer, but it was summertime in 1984. I would spend, like I said, summers with my grandma up there. And she had fallen asleep, and she did not have a bed for me, and I would just sleep in her same bed. And she left the door open, and when you would look through that door opening, it would lead you to a big bay window. And I just got the sense to wake up. Nothing told me. I got the sense that, hey, wake up. As I woke up and was looking out that bay window through the door frame, because the door was open. And again, I know this is going to sound weird, but from what I've been talking to other experiencers and other researchers, the weirder is, the more likely it really did happen, because the weirder it gets.
Yes. I understand exactly what you're talking about. Keep going.
So it basically, what I can articulate is, it was like the Apollo rocket was landing in reverse. So basically, a SpaceX rocket was landing before, obviously, there was a SpaceX rocket. It was landing in reverse. And the next thing I remember was there's three gray, I will say gray beings in the room that would look like the prototypical Whitley Strieber communion gray aliens. I'm not going to say they're aliens because I don't know what they are. I don't know where they came from. They didn't show me a star map. They didn't talk to me. They didn't do anything. They just were there. The next thing I remember is being outside on the side of the house where it would be, I would say, where the Apollo rocket had landed, but it wasn't there at that time. And I get the sense that I was not walking but floating, because I don't remember touching the ground. And they just basically floated me to the other side of the house, where the cornfield was pretty tall, but wasn't the full length yet, but it was pretty tall. And at that point, two things happened. One, I could hear a hooting of an owl, and then a much taller, maybe 7 foot tall, again, typical communion gray alien came out of the cornfield, and that's all I remember of that. The next thing I remember, I was back in my grandmother's bedroom. I'm looking back out that door frame, back through the bay window, and that same Apollo rocket taking back off, and it was gone. The next morning comes, I tell my grandmother, hey, did you see that rocket? She's like, oh, Chris, you were just imagining or dreaming. But like I said, that sense of smell came back, and it was always imprinted on me that when you, excuse me, when you grow up on a farm or you're around a farm, there is that sulfur smell of the earth. It's like, you cannot mistake that. And that entire time that we were on the side of the house where the cornfield was, I could smell that, and it imprinted on me. I can, like right now, I'm right back at that time in 1984. I could see it in my mind that's what happened. I'm not dreaming this, and I'm not making this up. So flash forward to 2016. I had a conversation with Mike Clellan, the owl guy, the guy who wrote, both of those books on UFOs and abductees and owls, on how they all come together. And he found it very interesting too that the sense of smell was very pronounced. He thought that was very interesting. The other interesting thing he thought was the fact that I had open heart surgery. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. I'm getting over a cold. Excuse me. Any case, I'm dying here.
Get some water.
I'm trying. Go ahead, Frank. Talk about something I don't know.
Yeah. I'd seen that book, and I was thinking owls. That is kind of odd. I never gave much thought to it, but apparently it does come up not infrequently.
Yeah, it was interesting to talk to him because he also lived in Michigan during his youth. Excuse me. And he had an experience in Southfield, which is not that far away from me. And he was walking home from school or from a football game, excuse me, and got basically taken. But he just thought that was very interesting. And he said, the other thing that is in his research that would really, really, really bothers me, and it bothers my wife, excuse me, I'm so sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Was in his research, and this is kind of creepy, people who have the name Chris or permutations of Christopher, Christoph, Christine, they tend to have interactions with said phenomenon. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what? And he goes, also, this, I did not say this or talk to him about this. He just asked me point blank. He's like, are you German too? People who with German hereditary or with heritage tend to also be involved with this phenomenon. I was like, OMG, holy mackerel. So that for me confirmed that this event really did take place. And then
just jump in here real quick.
Yeah.
Wolford, that's a pretty English name, is it not?
yeah, that's on my dad's side, but on
Right.
my
So
mom's
your
side,
mom's side. Now your grandmother was she your dad's mom, or is she your mom's
no,
mom?
my mom's mom.
There
My
you
mom's
go.
mom.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it really is going against me that this really did take place. So basically, so from 4 to 11, I didn't get involved with the subject really. I'd hear about UFO here or there, but I really kind of just forgot about it. And then it wasn't until 11 when we were on Sanibel Island and we had gone there for spring break. My parents had taken me and some of my other family members, and we were there and we saw some orange glowing orbs that were doing maneuvers that aircraft couldn't do. And this is shortly after, I would say, the Gulf breeze flap had kind of died down a little bit. And that was interesting because the stuff that these orbs were doing was very like technical. There's no way an airplane could do that, in my opinion. So we saw that, and there was multiple witnesses. I would say 12, 13 people saw that. There was one witness who was a doctor who kept saying it was a boat mast, and my father and I were like, there's no way it's a boat mast. It's too high in the sky, but whatever. If you want to say it's a boat mast, it's a boat mast for you. And then not till 1993, I was walking to middle school, not middle school, my bus stop, excuse me, for middle school. And I got the sense that somebody's watching me. So I turned around, and above the pine tree that was in front of our house, maybe 50 feet above that, was a Bob Lazar sport model. Clear as day. There was a daylight sighting. And as soon as I said, oh my God, it blinked out and was gone. And then from 93 until 2016, I didn't have any events. And really, to be honest, I kind of lost interest in this whole field and this whole topic, to be honest. It wasn't until 2016 when they decided to interact with me again, I would say.
Got it.
So,
Got it. So what happened then? What happened in 2016?
This one was interesting in the respect of I thought it was going crazy um, because I had started to really start to look at this topic again, and take it seriously, and really dig down and deep into it. And I decided I was going to go to this MUFON conference, the state of Michigan MUFON conference, the big one. There was the anniversary for the swamp gas,
Right, right, right.
swamp gas sighting. But I went to leave in the morning to go to that conference. I go to step out my front door of my house, and all of a sudden a voice that is not my own entered my mind and said, "If you go to this conference, we will no longer interact with you." And I just paused, said, "That's interesting." Didn't really think much about it at that point, and continued on my way. Went to the conference. Didn't think a whole lot until I got home from the conference. Then it kind of dawned on me, like, that was really weird. It's like, am I going nuts? I know I'm not going nuts, but that wasn't my voice, and it stopped me in my tracks. Then it wasn't until May or right around Memorial Day of 2017, so last year. Again, similar thing, but this time we were in upstate New York. My wife wanted to go to Sharon Springs in New York for something that she wanted to go do as like a little mini vacation. And I was sitting in this hotel room with my daughter, and again, the same kind of voice came in my mind and told me, "You need to pay attention to Robert Bigelow and how I'm surmising, I don't remember exactly what it said, but basically the message was, you need to take a look at him, excuse me, and how he relates to the lawn effort," which I thought was very interesting.
No wonder you're such a big fan.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
No wonder you're such a big fan.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah. I get so much for that, but whatever.
But you are, and I think all three of us are. I mean, we all have our criticisms here and there, but by and large, this show wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for their efforts. So
Yeah.
I'm glad they're doing what they're doing. They're
So am I.
kicking some things over, absolutely. Now you've been a little bit critical of some of the researchers out there have been taking some shots at them.
Oh, yes. I have so much to say on this. I'm glad you brought it up. This is where the part of the show that you're going to get a lot of thumbs down, possibly. I don't know. Or at least people may defriend me. I don't know, and I really don't care. I'm not trying to like badmouth anybody, but it's the truth. And actually, a little disclaimer: Frank and I talked back in April on Skype about this whole ordeal, and I have photographic proof that I sent to him that I'm not just making this up. I really did have these conversations with these people. So where do you want to begin, Robbie Graham or MJ Benares? And again, I'm not trying to badmouth either one.
I saw something from Dr. Joe Burks, who had been on our show a few weeks back, posted from Graham. Rubbed me the wrong way. It really wasn't about To the Stars per se, but it was about... I thought it was rather elitist and really exclusionary in terms of people getting involved in UFOs. That well, here's Jacques Vallée, and who do you think you are compared with him? And it's like, I'm an old hockey player. I was a hockey player when I was younger. I was never Wayne Gretzky, but that didn't keep me from playing and enjoying.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was something I didn't like. So what did Graham say that you didn't like?
Okay, so yeah, so I have a good relationship, I would say, or at least I did up until this point, this interview. If he's listening, he's probably not, but whatever. Robert Graham's a good guy, and he's always been very nice to me when I've talked to him, and I've talked to him quite a lot via Facebook Messenger. He's been very kind to me, so I'm not I'm not trying to bash on him.
Yeah.
But
we can disagree without being disagreeable.
Yeah, but I'm going to state fact, and the fact of the matter is for a year leading up to the October 11th press conference for To the Stars, all he did was try to throw me off the whole DeLon train. He kept telling me it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your time. Don't bother with it. Don't bother with Tom DeLon. There's nothing going to come of it. And he was very adamant that that Tom DeLonge's being used by the intelligence community for something that we'll never truly know. And I just never bought that. I was like, Robbie, I disagree with you, but I love your book, Silver Screen Saucer. It's probably one of the best written UFO books ever in the last 15 years. But I totally disagree with you. And he, for a year, would just say, Chris, why are you wasting your time? And then he wrote those 2 pieces for Mysterious Universe, Part 1 and Part 2, The DeLon Delusion, which, again, at that point, I don't even think, really looking back at it now, he kind of got a lot of things wrong with the whole DeLon Delusion, both parts. But whatever, that's a criticism of mine. So he just tried to throw me off and not say that this was going to amount to anything. And that there was, and then in the last conversations, he just kept saying it was going to be money grab. It's all about the money. That's what all these UFO people say, or at least these elitist UFO people. It's all about the money. They're trying to get money, and it's stock options. It's the same thing. It's like, you're like a broken record. Shut up. It's the carrot they always dangle in front of the UFO community. They dangle that money carrot because it separates the wheat from the chaff. The people who will cling on to they're just trying to make money, will cling on to that, and then they won't go any further. So in any case, Robert Graham, him and I disagreed. And then the big point for me, where I kind of knew that I needed to go my separate way with my research from talking to Robert Graham, is when he kept telling me that Jacques Vallée quit the whole this is before To the Stars, but he quit the DeLon effort, and that he wasn't working with him, and he found out that Tom DeLon was a fraud, and that he wasn't to be taken seriously, and that this whole Tom DeLon effort was going to be nothing but a joke. And then I sent that message to Grant Cameron, and Grant's like, I don't know about that, buddy. Like, Chris, I don't think that's the case. I'm talking to people right now that say that Grant Cameron's still in that organization. Now, mind you, this is, again, before To the Stars, so I would say this was January or late December of late 2016, early 2017, when this kind of transpired. And then I said to Robbie Graham, I said, Grant's telling me that, Jacques Vallée's still very much part of this whole thing. And basically Robbie's like, you can't believe Grant because he's just crazy. I said, okay, so you're going to go that route. Okay, whatever, that's fine. And then Christopher Bledsoe shared something with me that I don't think he shared with a lot of other people, was a photo of him, Tom DeLon, and Jacques Vallée in the same picture. And this was after supposedly Jacques Vallée had quit. So then I sent that, or I talked to Robbie Graham about that. He's like, no, that's made up. I said, okay, we're done here. Yeah, we're done here. So that kind of just turned me off to Robbie Graham, and now he doesn't really talk about the whole To the Stars thing at all. He just says it's beyond him. He's elitist now. He doesn't. He shoves his nose in the air whenever it gets talked about, which that's fine. And most UFO researchers, I should say, a majority of UFO researchers, at least the big name ones, have kind of shown their true colors because they see the tsunamis coming and it's going to wash them away because nobody's going to believe the word they say anymore because the DeLon effort is going to be, I would say, probably to lead people to be the ones talking about the subject. It's not going to be the Robbie Grahams of the world. It's not going to be the, I don't even want to mention any other names, but it's not going to be the people who you think it's going to be talking about this, Well,
there have been a couple guys who I think have come up really short in terms of the materials aspect of all this. One guy is John Greenewald, who keeps keeps harping on FOIA requests. And what he doesn't seem to get about all this is that not all this is in government hands. A lot of this material has been floating around in private hands for years, and as a result of that, what is a FOIA request going to get you? The government never had it, never held it, never studied it, so they're not going to have anything on it. So it's like if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you, and FOIA requests are just not going to solve that. And he's running around saying, well, I've sent FOIA requests, I'm not getting anywhere with them. Well, guess what? You're not going to get anywhere with FOIA requests on that particular aspect, but there's a lot out there. And another guy who did an interview, I think, with UFO Hub, who generally is well regarded, generally I well regard him, Richard Dolan, he's talking about the discrepancy between alloys and metamaterials. It was deliberate, and it was a CIA plot. That they deliberately planned that. It's just a language discrepancy. It's not that big a deal. And he's talking about his sources are telling him this about metamaterials. You've got 3 scientists who are on the record talking about this stuff. Vallée himself, Nolan, who we talked about plenty, and also Peter Sturrock, who I mentioned earlier. All 3 of them are on the record, either doing presentations before symposiums, writing papers, doing little AMAs online about it. This stuff is out there. It's been out there, and they've kind of dropped the ball on this. The only other guy besides me who's really compiled a lot of information regarding this that's pretty accurate is a guy named Red Pill Junkie, whose real name I can't remember off the top of my head.
Miguel Romero.
There you go, Miguel.
Yeah, Miguel's a good guy.
Yeah. He's been on it too, and that information is out there. Make of it what you will, but I believe that they believe they're onto something, and that's really as far as it goes. There's a limited amount of information on it, not that much, and that's kind of the way it goes. But at least, even if there's not a lot of information, you should make sure that your information is accurate. And they're not really doing that. They're not really digging in and finding out the whole story behind that aspect of the phenomenon.
No, they really have dropped the ball, I would agree. And John Greenwald is hilarious. He gets so angry at the fact that, how dare the government not respond to my FOIA request? It's like, dude, and here's the other thing, and I'm going to get to this with MJ Banias, and it kind of shows you that we as a community are being watched. And it's all about how you communicate and deal with these people on a personal level. Even when Dr. Nolan was still on Facebook, and I would even probably say, if you're nice to him on Twitter, he'll be nice to you, and he'll give you a little bit. But if you're going to be a jerk, and you're just going to just say, this is stupid, and why are we wasting our time, because it's all about the money again, they're not going to give you anything. And furthermore, they're not going to work with you because they're watching everybody. They're literally watching everybody. I hope everybody realizes that. They're watching all of us. I know some people would say, how do you know that? Well, I know that because basically Gary Nolan came out and said that To the Stars has people that are watching explicitly the UFO community on Facebook. Okay, so I don't know if that means like intelligence apparatus of To the Stars. I don't think so. Obviously, some of them are ex-CIA, but they're watching us and they're trying to see what we do with this information. And so far, some of us have not been very kind to this whole effort and kind of like tried to poo-poo it before it even got going, which I don't understand. So we beg and we want more data, new data, and we get it, but then those people get pissy and crappy about it and basically shrug their shoulders and say this is nothing new, when it is. It's totally new. I don't understand this disconnect, and I don't know. I don't have time for those people anymore. I really don't. So, yeah. So getting back to MJ Banias. So again, another guy, younger researcher who I respect, but I'm going to tell a spade is a spade. This story, and it all happened. I sent Frank the photos of the conversation, so I'm not making this up. Nope. I know MJ probably get mad for me talking about this, but I don't really care. The UFO community needs to realize there's certain cliques in this community that don't want this to succeed whatsoever, and they want it to desperately fail, and they'll do anything in their power to basically try to mitigate or talk down about this whole effort that the Lawn campaign has had. So MJ Banias, again, it was right around the time that I was talking to Gary Nolan a lot. MJ Banias messages me out of the blue because I kind of hinted towards him that I was going to be possibly considered for the study. And MJ was like in a frantic panic mode one day. He's like, Chris, you need to tell Dr. Nolan I'm so sorry that my 2-year-old grabbed my phone and to send him a gibberly gobbledygook message, and I apologize for that. Because basically what happened was is MJ's kid got a hold of his phone and sent a jumbled message to Nolan. So Nolan took it as MJ Benias is like messing with him. So he got pissed. And Nolan had every right. So he got pissed and said, why should I even waste my time with somebody like this? And that's when he Nolan let slip that, hey, we're watching this community and we are watching how you interact with us or other members and how we give you information basically. And MJ screwed that relationship up by he had told Nolan, I'll write exactly what you're telling me, but I want creative control over how I write this piece, because I guess he was going to write something for his blog or something. And basically Nolan said, absolutely not. I get total control over what is written about me. End of story. If you don't like that, then go take a hike. And that's where MJ Benias was like, I'm not going to give into that. That's a totally unacceptable demand. What? You're asking a guy who's connected to the stars, who's going to waste his time with your little blog, and you're going to tell him that you want total control? No. I don't think you understand how this works. You have to be nice to him and kind of like coddle to his needs. It's not the other way around, because he's got what you want. You have nothing that he needs.
Well,
So,
I went through this a little bit with Dr. Nolan back in December when we put together my little story on the materials. I think it was really more about being technically correct, because he had written a lot of things sort of on the fly, very ad hoc. And when he saw it, and he said, basically what happened was he started doing this AMA basically between Christmas and New Year's, just very much on the fly, winging it basically. But I'd said, look, this is very valuable material. This should be out there. It's going to get buried at my group under tons of other stuff as new stuff comes up. What I'd like to do is, take it and basically copy and paste it over and put it in an article at my website, so people can see it and they can find it easily, and they can go check it out. And he was fine with that. But there were a couple things that he wanted to clean up from a technical standpoint. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Let's make sure that we get this right. I had no problems with that. And that might very well be the case. When you get into some of this more technical material, you want to make sure it's right. You know what I mean?
No, I get that. And I
get that too.
My qualm with MJ Benias was like he was trying to get me to, get Dr. Nolan to come back and talk to him. It's like, that's not my place. It's your fault. Okay, I get it. A 2-year-old grabs a cell phone and sends a message to Dr. Nolan. Yeah, you need to email him and send him an apology and blah, 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 blah. But if you're not okay with him having total control of what he says, and you better print exactly what he says, then why even bother wasting your time with him? If you know that's what he's going to do, because you've seen other people do or interact with him, then why is it such a big deal? And MJ was really mad with me. How dare, this is why nobody trusts, to the stars. I'm like, no, I think they just want to get stuff right, and they don't want you just to write whatever the hell you feel like.
Some of it can get very involved, and I think getting it right is a little bit more important than it's a compromise, but I think it's a compromise that's worth it, because you want to get things as right as possible. And, that was my opinion on it, and I didn't think twice about it.
But in my opinion, that just shows, in those two examples, how cliquish and how naive these researchers are. And then I've done a podcast with MJ Benias right shortly after the October 11th announcement of To the Stars. And he, on that podcast that's out there, it was Jason McClellan's podcast.
Yep.
He tells the group that he never once read anything that Tom Dolan has talked about or in any interviews or listened to any of the interviews that Tom Dolan has given. He's just going off the cuff of what he's seen and heard in the community. So basically going off of other people's opinions, that's not being a very good researcher.
No.
But
you get it. You get into the telephone game there because they don't necessarily recount things as they accurately happened, and it goes through a couple more hands, and it gets even more jarbled and jumbled up and messed up, and that's what you end up with. You end up with going with a misrepresentation, forming your opinions on a misrepresentation.
You end up with Joe Rogan.
Yeah. So it's just a sad state of affairs to see the community, not as a whole, but at least certain cliques have dropped the ball because they desperately don't want this to succeed because they don't want to be wrong. At the end of the day, that's what it boils down to, is they don't want to be wrong. They want to be proven correct and say, see, we rode in on a white horse. We're correct. We are the gods of knowledge for this subject. We are the only ones that you should be listening to. Dolan is just some rock star in his CIA assets and his scientific assets. Don't listen to them. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. But listen to us. No. That's not how it works, there, buddy. I'm sorry, but that's not how it works. And I know a lot of people get really mad with me, but that's the case. I mean, you're just being belligerent about it, really. Yeah. And I'm not saying you have to believe everything. But
generally, I really like Dolan.
Yeah, so do I, but I think he's really dropped the ball.
Yeah. A lot of things. Obviously, I've listened to the show. It's been a while since I listened to it a lot. It kind of conflicts with my work schedule now, but I've listened to him in the past quite a bit. You do kind of run out of material after a little while when it comes to the UFO stuff. And he's sort of branched over into the politics. See, what a lot of guys will do that Dolan hasn't, and I do really respect this, is that he has not really compromised on the UFO stuff for the most part. I think he's getting, like I said, I think he got that materials aspect of what's going on right now wrong. But in general, he doesn't reach on the UFO stuff. He stays pretty conservative with that. He doesn't go too far out with it. And a lot of people do that. They hit a point where they run out of material, so they start pushing further and further and further out and relying on a weaker and weaker material to keep themselves being able to generate fresh material. But the fresh material isn't really fresh material. It's bad material. There are plenty of guys who do that. Dolan, to his credit, has not, but I think he's way off on the materials.
Yeah.
Based on what I heard in that one interview, anyway.
I would agree.
Yeah, so, and I can understand that. The community in general is really super apprehensive about just accepting what To the Stars Academy says. I mean, when To the Stars Academy first came along, I was very suspect of the whole operation myself. I said, you got, Tom DeLonge, you have some guys from the CIA and the Pentagon. What's going on here? Hold on a second. And then, at first it looked like maybe nothing was going to happen. Then he came out with a picture of him, in Washington with John Podesta. And
at first it was going to be a documentary. You remember? He was just DeLonge was just going to do a documentary.
Yeah.
And he had that little clip where he was sitting down with Podesta. And I was thinking to myself, oh, this could be a pretty good documentary. I'll definitely watch it. I'll watch a bad UFO documentary. I'll watch them all.
Yeah.
But that it looked pretty good. And then apparently there was more. And, we've gotten a lot more chit-chat about UFOs, found out some new stuff. I got tipped off, again, about the material stuff. It was funny. I was... after it came out, I was talking to a UFO researcher I know, George Hansen, And he was like, "Oh yes, yes," who's been at this for years. You understand? And he said, "Oh yes, yes, that material, the Yuba Tuba material, that was talked about quite a bit back in the '80s." Well, that's great, George, but I wasn't researching this stuff back in the '80s. I had no idea about it. I've interviewed Peter Sturrock before, and I had no idea he was so heavily involved in all this. So this was news to me, and again, it's an interesting aspect of the phenomena that's worth a closer look.
Yeah. Well, again, what I was saying is that you have, at first it almost looks like nothing's going to happen, and then stuff starts actually happening. People are like, hold on, wait a second. This is actually real, what they're going forward with. So, and it's, it was actually pretty well coordinated, where a lot was done. It's clear that To the Stars Academy had their ducks in a row before they really came out, and that's how they were able to succeed, I think.
But James, they used a Mylar balloon in the photo for the Tic Tac.
Oh, God.
Darn it, that's not really UFO.
And that's what is so annoying. I mean, like, come on.
That was an unforced error, that's for sure. That was a turnover.
Yeah. And the funny thing about that is Jimmy Church made a big post about that and all this, like, months after the fact. Like, you're just realizing that they use that picture now. Didn't you watch the press conference and, conclude to yourself? That's not a UFO. They're obviously using that for creative, representation. I mean, it's obvious. When I first saw the October.
Well, that was the picture that Firesweep used, that the website used. They were pointing people to go over to read the Firesweep article, which I did right away, of course.
Yeah, which is what the article they cited in the presentation. So
yeah, to me, the whole Jimmy Church. So he interviews Tom DeLonge. I remember the interview like it happened yesterday. A very good interview, very interesting. And then he goes and wants to talk crap about that whole thing. I don't know. I think that's like he wants his boy Corey Good to succeed and not have his money train be stopped. And so he has to talk crap about the whole DeLonge operation. But hey, I'm not trying to make anybody mad, but that's just my observation.
I think that Jimmy Church has people whispering in his ear and telling him that it's some kind of clandestine operation that's going to mislead the public, and he's taking that on note and going with it as if that's the absolute truth, when really none of us really know.
Well, for me, if it was a total disinformation campaign, like some have stated,
not disinformation, it would be misinformation, but
well, even some disinformation. If that was truly a campaign that the U.S. government was playing, then they wouldn't give us anything. Grant Cameron's right. They wouldn't talk about anything then. If they were wanting this out in this way, they want it out for a reason. And I believe the reason, like Grant has said before, is they painted themselves into a corner. And this is the best way for them to get out of that corner without having their sort of, quote unquote, their fingerprints on said phenomenon. Because if they could just come out and say, yeah, we've been researching this, that, other thing, and they come out, or the president comes out and says, by the way, we're not alone, that's going to be game over. People are going to lose their stuff, and the world will stop in 2 seconds. But the way they're doing it through private industry, everything's coming through Bigelow Aerospace. Nothing's coming from the government per se. And even the people who are saying, well, we didn't get official papers from this whole Tic Tac event. Of course you're not. You're not going to get something with the Department of Navy or something with letterhead from the NSA or the DIA or anybody like that. You're not going to get that stuff. That's not how it works. The way it works is they release the stuff, and yes, it did get a pass to get released, maybe not in the correct way, like Paul Dean had said, but it got released, and you have to deal with that. And people are still saying, it could be CGI, or you have Mick West who oh my God, it could be a bird. Mick, you know what? You go fly away, okay? You be a bird. If if it's a bird,
well, I have to admit, when I first saw that Go Fast video, I thought, could that be a bird? I've seen his explanation. I don't agree with it, but I'm okay with Mick West. I like Mick West.
I can't stand him. I can't deal with people who just poo-poo on everything about the UFO phenomenon. at all. Like, I don't have time for it anymore. It's either not that I am saying that you have to agree with me, but at least be open to the possibility. And he's not even open. He's saying no, but the bird. And I'm an expert in Raytheon FLIR devices, weapon
Well,
systems.
I'm not sure so sure that's exactly what he's saying, but he is trying to offer
Pretty close,
explanations.
though, Frank. Pretty close.
Now, I'm okay with a good, honest skeptic. I am. I don't have any problems with it. They have made points that that have forced me to tighten up my arguments a little bit. I think that if you stay open-minded to a good skeptic, not just a naysayer,
Yeah.
naysaying isn't being a good skeptic. That it can benefit your work. Let's put it that way.
No, I have no problem with that. But when you continually just be a pessimist about every little thing that has come out and so much evidence, it's ridiculous. Like, how much more do you actually need for you finally to maybe let that door open a little bit? Like, how much more do you actually need? Do you need to land on your front lawn? I mean, do you? Or do you want,
Yeah,
better
for
yet,
some
maybe,
people, that's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
well, I can tell you right now, I wouldn't wish, just to be honest, and you can talk to other experiencers, to other people that dealt with the paranormal. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. You don't want you think it. Like, I'm not saying you, but I'm just saying people who like, I want to be abducted. No, you don't. It's not a fun thing. Like, it's not like a joyride at Disneyland. It messes with your head. It causes you to examine yourself. Are you crazy? For a while there, my wife and I were pretty angry with each other because she wants me to like get away from the subject because it doesn't bring anything but bad to my health and my well-being when I talk about this. And that's why I wanted this interview to be my last. And sadly, the phenomenon doesn't allow that to happen. I kid you
You
not.
got more lined up.
I got more lined up. People just came out of the woodwork and said, "Hey, we want you to do your show." I'm like, "Oh, come on. Like, I really don't want to talk about this anymore. I really don't. I just want to focus on my life, my own research, and be done with it." But my point is, you don't want to be abducted, and you don't want to, per se, be in the presence of this phenomenon because it messes with you, and it messes with your head, and sometimes it messes with your family, and it's not something that you should take lightly. I know some people say, "Oh, when it would be so much fun." I don't know that that's the word I'm going to use to describe what happened, especially the fact that it can just enter your mind and tell you stuff, and then it just clicks off and you don't hear from it again for like another year, or the fact that you see these things. And by the way, going back to my event, I was never scared of those things. Like, I never had fear, but in the years after that, especially in the years after that, especially when Communion came out, the movie, I was deathly afraid. I wouldn't even come close to my bedroom at nighttime. I was deathly afraid. I just knew something was off. Something, if I was alone, that something was going to come and get me. And I will add, because I know we're kind of beyond that, but we were talking to the stars, but let's go back to my event real quick. I took my daughter to this farmhouse. My uncle lives there now, just past April 1st. And my aunt and uncle live there still. And this is interesting. The window in their bedroom that looks down where the cornfield would be, they have paranormal stuff happen in their house quite often with that window, where the drapes or the window dressings get messed with, either at night or they'll be in the living room where that big bay window is, and you'll hear, and it is so weird that they said that just this past April. I thought I had to add that. I totally forgot that I should add that. But it's very interesting that, like, this, whatever is there may not just be extraterrestrial. It could be something else, or who knows? I don't know. That's why I'm not in the camp of it's got to be ET. I know that's going to turn some people off, but that's my God honest truth.
Yeah, well,
So
generally, I guess it just happens to be a lot of people that end up having a UFO or ET experience. They normally, from what I understand, have a lot of different other experiences that would be considered paranormal,
Yeah,
for whatever reason that is.
yeah. I mean, some people would say it's connected to how much stress is in your life. And James, you and I and Frank were talking before the show started how you asked if my wife had seen a UFO, and I said no, but we had a paranormal experience together. And this place in Michigan is almost like a Skinwalker Ranch type of place, I would say, because I know there's other phenomenon that's happened there in the past. But our experience was very poltergeist in the sense of like the water would ripple. I'm not going to go into that event, but the water rippled and was angry. The temperature, it was a November day. The temperature went from 70 degrees here in Michigan, which is not a typical time to be that warm in that late November. But it dropped 40 degrees. It got to the point where you could see your breath in a matter of seconds. And whatever was happening in this park, this Native American petroglyph park in the thumb of Michigan, whatever was happening was very angry at what we were doing. And then we weren't really doing anything. We were just walking around in the park. And I knew from my dad's experience with Native Americans is you need to give an offering of something. And my wife at that time smoked. And I told her, give me a cigarette, let me break it up, and then we'll give it tobacco, and everything calmed down. The water calmed down, the temperature came back up, and that ominous feeling went away. I cannot explain. It was me, my wife, and my cousin. So there was 3 people that experienced it. Excuse me. So, yeah.
The phenomenon likes to smoke.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's. I've heard other stories of like almost like little Pudgewucky looking creatures in that park. I've heard. My cousin and I, we had heard like Bigfoot calls. I know this is not a Bigfoot show, and I'm not trying to get into cryptozoology, but I'll be honest, we heard what you would think is a Sasquatch and calling. It was really strange. And I will say this too. Some people say there's that like Oz factor when they're in the presence of a UFO, or the time like kind of distorts. It kind of felt that way too during that entire time when we were in that park. When this event took place. So that's all I can say. And really, since then, I haven't messed with anything. I haven't gone anywhere. I really haven't had any other experiences. I will say this, I've told Frank this before, it almost seems that every time I try to distance myself from this subject or the phenomenon and get away from it, it pulls me back in. It's so weird. And I've talked to other researchers and some other experiencers, and they all say the same thing, that it doesn't let you do that. It keeps you going forward. It keeps you on the page that you need to be on. And if you deviate, it just, your research just takes a nosedive, or what you shouldn't be looking in that. I don't know how to explain it. Like, I can't articulate. You just have to experience it yourself. It just kind of like goes away. It's weird. So yeah, I don't. Any questions, guys?
Chris, what do you think we've got coming up over the next few months? By the end of the year, what do you think we're going to be with all this?
From my interaction with Gary Nolan, he had said that 2018 would be a very interesting year for this subject. And then going off of what Grant had said, both to me privately and then out in public, is I do believe his sources are correct in that To the Stars probably has 20 plus videos, and they're going to get better with each one. Again, it's a walk the public to this phenomenon, not run them to this phenomenon, and don't get them scared. Slowly hold their hand and bring them to the realization that this is indeed real, and that this phenomenon represents something. What? I don't know. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that it is going to be your best friend. But at the same time, I don't think he's out to kill people. But I think he has the potential to do that. And I know some people in the ETH community would probably not like me saying that ETs are, they're here for peace. I don't necessarily agree with that. And I'm not sitting here and saying that they're here to destroy us either, because if they wanted to, they probably would have destroyed us a long time ago. But I feel that we're going to learn a lot more in 2018. I think it's going to be a year for people to look back in time and say, this was the year, or late 2017 into 2018, was the time frame where we really, in the public, have started to take this phenomenon serious and for real. And that it's not for ridicule. It's no longer X-Files music and ha ha ha, there's lights or you're going to get probed or anything like that. They're actually taking it seriously, which for me is awesome, because now me, you, Frank, James, and everybody else that we like, we don't look like crazy people anymore. You know, before you kind of get ridiculed that you're just, oh, you're the UFO guy. Well, I hate to say it, it's a real thing. You need to deal with that. You know, some people, it's going to be really hard for people. I'm not going to go the religious way, but it's going to be hard for some people to accept that, yeah, there's this other stuff. There's, like Grant says, there's no there. It's endless, you know. Who knows what we're dealing with? I don't know. I will never say or claim, yes, we're dealing with extraterrestrials or we're dealing with interdimensionals or anything like that. I don't know. I just know it's really weird. It interacts with people in an individual way. Yes, people can have like mass sightings, but typically the UFO phenomenon is an individual one. It's not a group thing, you know? So, no, I think 2018 is going to be a very big year. I think we're going to learn a lot. I think we're going to see a lot. And honestly, I think it's going to be really, really fun. I think for some people it's going to be kind of upsetting because they're going to be like, you know.
There are a lot of people out there who look to find things to get upset about. So you're always going to run into that.
I mean, it's the outrage of the day, but it's you got to deal with it, though. That's the problem. Like, you had to deal with the fact that the report on the Nimitz event was released. You had to deal with that. You had to deal with the fact that the Tic Tac video, now granted, I had that 2 weeks prior to it being released from To the Stars. I was given to me by a person that was loosely associated with Jeremy Corbell. And that video mysteriously has disappeared off of my Facebook Messenger. But I did have that Tic Tac video 2 weeks prior to the Stars releasing it, which was interesting. But I don't know where I was going with this. I lost my train of thought.
There's more on the way.
Yeah, there's just, I mean, I don't know for sure what is coming up other than we will not be disappointed. I'll say that. And then this is also from Chris Bledsoe, who was part of the whole To the Stars thing, and they kind of went his separate ways once they, at least what I was told, he did not like the way that group was going to push the evil alien agenda, and that he didn't think that this was evil in any way, shape, or form. So he parted ways, and he had told me a few times that, brother, there's going to be a lot coming. He couldn't get into it because, again, he signed an NDA, but what he did say to me was interesting, that, you know, there's a lot to this. It's not just some kind of psyop for the public, you know. And again, I think the UFO community does a disservice to themselves. This whole DeLone effort is not pointing at us. It's pointing at the public. It's not for us. It's for the public. We are not. I mean, yes, they do watch us, but we're not the intended target for this campaign. The public is, because now you see people talking about this and taking this seriously, which never would happen before. Never. And I'm sorry, people who say that this has been done before, you're wrong. This has never happened. We've never had this much media attention and this many articles and this much attention on the details of what this phenomenon possibly represents ever. And if you think otherwise, that's fine. That's your opinion. But in my opinion, I don't remember a time ever. And that the people I've talked to, researchers and even experiencers, they all agree that they've never seen this much activity ever. So something is happening. Something clearly is happening. So, yeah, I don't know what else you would like to talk about, but
yeah. Do you have anything else there, James?
No, that's just about it. Other than to say that, yeah, it's been going, pretty strong since the December 2017 article with the New York Times. It really hasn't let up that much.
Well, people would say it has, though. That's the problem. Like I saw
No.
somebody had commented, "What has To the Stars done anything lately?" I'm like, "Yeah, they. I
Have
mean,
you been paying attention?
what have you lived under a rock? I mean, and here's another thing is, and I can't prove this. Okay, I'm just gonna put this out here, and Frank or James, you could speak to this possibly too. And I can't prove this. I can't. I have no factual proof on this, but I'm just gonna let it go. Isn't it interesting that Jeremy Corbell and both George Knapp somehow always had the goods that is slightly connected to the stars, but not quite, but it kind of is, and they somehow get the big scoop, I should say. Like with Corbell, he gets to put out the Skinwalker movie. He gets to put out the Bob Lazar definitive documentary, which, by the way, To the Stars is going to be putting out the autobiography of Bob Lazar. People don't realize that, though. So
Yeah.
I find it interesting that those guys, and again, I don't know if they're working together. Jeremy has never indicated that he is, but I find it very interesting that he gets so much, and he gets, so.
Jeremy Corbell, I mean, he's been commenting on this, and if you listen to when he talks, he's letting on that he knows a little more than he can say every time he talks. And going back to even 2016, when I think he did an interview with Jimmy Church, and I would assume that a lot of this stuff he knew, like the other name for ATIP, the AAWSAP. For him to know that, really before any of it was being leaked out, George Knapp is a little more careful, but he'll let some of it out. But I think that Jeremy Corbell knew that well beforehand.
I agree.
And then when it started to kind of like ripple out from Paul Dean and some of the other people, he posted the photo
with the name in the photo,
backboard with the name in the photo, which you pointed out on Twitter. You're like, hey, look at that. I don't think he just took that photo that day.
No, I don't think so. I think he's been working on this stuff for a while, and we have to for people to realize is he's been in the same car with Tom DeLonge, so it's I mean, it's not that much of a stretch to say that they are working, and that's why I include their work with this whole To the Stars, even though they're not under the umbrella of To the Stars. I still include it because we're getting so much. It's ridiculous. We're getting so much you can't keep up with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's for the first time in a long time that, where it's really hard to keep up with everything that's going on. And Bob Lazar, like you said, Jeremy Corbell is doing the documentary on him, yet Tom DeLonge is doing his biography.
Yeah.
And Bob Lazar doesn't associate with people really. So for him to be associating with Tom DeLonge and with Jeremy Corbell is, evident of something.
Yeah, there's clearly a consortium there. There's To the Stars, and then you've got connections back to Bigelow's either Bass or NIDS or whatever corporation he's formed to get this or that done. The Green Nolan study, Jacques Vallée, maybe sort of a freelancer doing what he wants when he wants, but it's always interesting. A lot of the guys, they talk about it being a CIA operation. Obviously, there's some guys who worked in the past. Semivan and Elizondo himself worked in Defense Intelligence. So there is that. But by the same token, they've got their names on this thing, too.
Yeah. Well, and with George Knapp, I'm going to assume, he says in the preview for Jeremy Corbell's movie, Hunt for the Skinwalker, that he had to sign an NDA and he had all this information. And when all those studies were going on years ago, I would make a bet that he knew all this stuff.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, he knew a lot. I don't know about everything, but he knew a lot.
I think most of this, just because he, the whole, Jeremy Corbell is kind of pushing that all this stuff with Skinwalker Ranch has an association with ATIP. And that was going back to the beginning of the ATIP program.
I will give you guys a little, and I won't mention the person's name. I'll just say they are a person that I know that lives in Michigan. This person is the experiencer, and they had interactions during the time that Bigelow owned MUFON. And this person went to the big MUFON conference in Colorado. I probably even shouldn't say this, but I'll let a little bit out, and it's interesting of note. This person basically got pulled to the side at a Starbucks with George Knapp, and George Knapp basically told this person, "Yeah, you're having these events at your house in Michigan. Robert Bigelow would be very interested in hearing more about your events." And that never really took place. But I will say this person was in MUFON, and they were on the STAR team, and they knew at that time, because all the people that were on STAR teams had to sign NDA, because that's when Bigelow had bought basically MUFON, and they were on those rapid response teams. And this person kind of figured out that Bigelow was the person behind this. And here's the interesting part, that there was some kind of a military aspect to it. Now, they didn't know who, but they did realize that there was a military aspect to this whole project. But this person decided against being on that group because they just wanted to be left alone. They just wanted to live their life and kind of just forget about what had happened. And they didn't want any more shenanigans going on. And basically, this person didn't want to deal with the whole MUFON thing, didn't want to deal with the whole, I have to sign the NDA and all that rigmarole. So this person excused themselves from that situation. But it is interesting that MUFON got bought out by Robert Bigelow. And now we know that the DIA was that contract. And that's very interesting because this was a person that has nothing to gain from telling me this. And again, I'm not going to get into who this person is, but I can vouch for him. And it just is interesting for me to have that little window into the fact that, yes, that was the case. And I think
And you're saying basically that George Knapp was acting as a bit of a talent scout for Bigelow when he was going out to some of these conferences.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Alejandro Rojas. He was one of the people that also kind of figured out that this was a DIA. But again, he had signed the NDA, so he couldn't talk about it. And then people were like, MUFON, I guess, like blew up internally. Like they had the people who were like, how dare we have people have to sign NDAs and work with the government? And this guy, Robert Bigelow, and then you had the half that kept saying, this is excellent. This is great. Let's do this. But they didn't realize what all came with that, And again, I don't know if those people got actually paid. I don't know. I would assume they would, or at least got paid for their services to go on the ground, because Bigelow supposedly had that money where basically this response team could land in any state within a day or so, or even a couple hours.
It seems like if you were, I don't know how closely you were following things, but this kind of blew up just at the time I was getting really serious and really starting to do some hardcore research on this. It was kind of in the aftermath of the Stephenville case, which was really like the last big a case where you really had an entire community seeing things and being up in arms about it and getting a lot of national attention. So that happened, I think, in late 2008, and it was still just kind of dying down. But that seems to have maybe been the catalyst, a little bit of a fire under Bigelow to get some people out in the field a little bit more.
Well, it's interesting that Bigelow, it's like Grant has mentioned this, I believe even on your show, he went out and tried to buy a lot of data, and he did buy a lot of data. But there's some data it wasn't for sale, like the free organization data with the experiencers. Right. But You know, it's interesting. I mean, that tells me, as an educated person, that he obviously knows way more than what you or I know.
You mean
And
Bigelow
then
now?
yeah, Bigelow. And obviously, he alluded to that fact in the 60 Minutes interview. And then since then, he's gone silent. He hasn't said a
Yeah,
word.
yeah, yeah.
Nobody's been able to contact him. Nothing. We haven't heard crap from him, which I find very interesting. But I think that was the first salvo in this whole ongoing thing. I think it was like the little his tidbit that he wanted to get out, and then he went back in the shadows. I know his daughter is on like Facebook and Instagram, but she isn't posting anything very interesting. And really, it's kind of stalkerish that people are even trying to do that. But from what I've ascertained, she's not been forthright with whatever her father's doing. So I don't know. It's so interesting. Such cloak and dagger stuff, guys. Such cloak and dagger stuff.
It does get interesting, and not as interesting as the phenomenon itself, but the soap opera around it does get interesting now and then.
Yeah.
What I can't understand is though, Robert Bigelow is not the only rich guy in the world, and he's not the only rich guy who uses his financial resources to pursue a passion or an interest. A lot of guys, whose money, they might collect cars or art or something along those lines, but the payoff is always. They kind of let you know they've got it. They don't keep that a secret.
Yeah.
You might not be able to. They might not let you drive the car, but they'll show you a picture. They'll show you their garage where they've got a dozen or so antique cars stacked, or here's this masterpiece I collected and that's hanging on the wall of my living room. They'll let you know they've got it. They'll let you know what it is. But Bigelow is very tight-lipped about the specifics in terms of what he's got.
Yeah.
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 And you wonder what the end game
way.
is, because not to be morbid or anything, but the guy is into his 70s. It's like, well, what's going to happen with this stuff? What would happen with all the material he's gathered if by chance he falls ill or drops dead tomorrow?
That's a fantastic question. I mean,
I'd like to get Bigelow on and ask him myself, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll try to reach out to his daughter. I'm joking. I mean, the same could be said with Ray Stanford. The guy's sitting on tons of data, and he's got he also in I want to say 60s or 70s. He had a government contract.
He's got to be pushing 80 by now, I would
guess. But in the 60s or 70s, I don't know which it is, but he had a government contract from the Air Force to shoot lasers at UFOs. That is truth. That is the God-honest truth. They would call him, Ray Stanford, up, and he would shoot lasers at UFOs when they came near his house. I'm not making that up. That's the God-honest truth. And he's a guy who's got tons of data. He's got film footage, for crying out loud, but he doesn't want to release it. And then he also wants to talk about his dinosaur collection, which that's fine. I just wish these guys that were on this copious amounts of data just let it go. I mean, unless
some of it anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I get that's where some people are saying, well, see, they don't have anything. I disagree. I mean, if he spent that much money to build a hangar and like infrastructure to house this stuff, then obviously there's something to this phenomenon. Or he bought.
That's another thing I wanted to bring up. A lot gets made about that, but to the best of my knowledge, a lot of these materials and these fragments, they're really not that big. So when somebody said that they refitted or they repurposed the building, it might just be like one or two rooms within a building that they're using for a lot of other purposes as well, office space or whatever. It doesn't mean that they've got this entire warehouse filled with pieces of alien.
It's not like S4 or anything like that.
Exactly.
It would be very interesting to go take a walk through and see what they have.
Absolutely. But it's in any office building when, let's say, an accountant moves out and a dentist moves in. Well, they're going to change the office around a little bit for the dentist purposes, or a jewelry store is compared to a yoga studio. The jewelry store is going to need more security, that type of thing. What kind of security do you need for a yoga studio? You know what I mean? It's like that kind of thing happens all the time. I think it's just getting taken literally to the extreme. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I would love to find out who is actually the security for the whole Bigelow Aerospace. Is it EG&G? Is it somebody else? Is it some kind of private military contractor? Who is it? Because that we could possibly find out. That would be an interesting angle. Because if it's the same people who are security over Area 51, that'd be very interesting in my opinion. But I mean, I guess I'd have to actually start to work on that. That's just like a idea in my head. It's not something I've actually looked into. But yeah, it's this whole thing is very interesting. We live in very interesting times. I'm very excited. I will say that.
And hopefully
Like
they
for
get
my
more
daughter, who's
interesting.
3 years old. I'm excited for her. This is going to be pretty cool.
Yep,
Maybe.
absolutely.
I don't know. I could
No,
regret that.
I think it will be. I think I am. I'm excited by the subject. Obviously, I wouldn't have been into it as long as I have been, and the last not quite, I guess, 3/4 of a year, whatever it's been since last October. The things have picked up. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Chris, do you have anything else for us?
No. Do you have any more questions? I don't really have anything more.
I think we're good. We filled our hour and a half. It flew by.
Hopefully,
If,
you guys got something out of it. Maybe. I don't know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been fun. It's been a fun conversation. It's nice to get back in the saddle after a couple of weeks off, and we'll let you go. And thanks very much for coming on. Obviously, there's going to be more stuff to talk about down the road, and we'd be more than happy to have you back. So long as you don't finally fully retire from talking about all this,
No,
like you keep claiming you're going to do.
I'm not going to be retiring anytime soon. I thought that was sadly not the case. So I'm going to be around.
Great. So let's wrap it up. Thanks again, Chris, James. I don't think we lost the step at all during our vacation.
No, not at all. Not at all. That was good. It was a good comeback.
So we've got.
Thank you again, guys.
Not a problem. Glad to have you, Chris. Thanks again. And that's about it. We'll be back next week. Adam Dodd, we're going to have Adam Dodd on this month, and Dr. Lynn Katai is going to be on later this month talking about Phoenix Lights. And Dr. Dodd is a researcher in Australia who's written a good bit about science and scientists and their attitudes towards UFOs. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And obviously, we'll have more bookings come up, and we'll let you know as they do. And that's that. Have a good one,
Awesome.
everybody.
You too.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
You too.